All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you guys here today. How many of you had some, maybe some like tremors from a year ago this week when Hurricane Idalia moved through? Anybody kind of like a little twitch, like, oh no, please no, not again, right? Like, just thinking about all of that. I know that I did for sure, mostly because I was afraid that school was going to be closed like indefinitely. And I was like, come on, we got to get those kids back. Like, trees down, people displaced, all that. I was worried about that for sure. But I was really like, can we get my kids back at school? It throws your schedule for a loop, doesn't it? I don't know about you guys, but Hurricane Idalia definitely messed my week up a little bit. Kind of got me off sync or out of step. Anybody else stay up too late? Anybody? Just me. Okay. No, a few of you. Anybody, maybe eat your entire pantry out of nerves or feelings? Yeah, like a little bit more consumption. Anybody go to the store? And this one, I promise you, Hope City is a place. It's a judgment-free zone. Okay, so you can be honest. Anybody go out and buy like all of the water and toilet paper in Sarasota? Is that you? Did I see you at Sam's Club? Because I watched several people doing that. I'm like, what's changing here? Like, I don't understand. But how many of you maybe, and this one, maybe keep your hands down because they're next to you, gotten in an argument with somebody that they were telling you what you should do during the hurricane? You should evacuate, or, you need to stay put, or you need to board up. Like, it can get to a place where, like, it starts to disrupt relationships even. And we can get out of step and out of sync with one another so very quickly. Storms throw off rhythms, and one of the things that I did was it was like way too late. And I found myself sitting on the couch watching the Netflix show Quarterback. Any football fans here? Like, supposedly college football started or something, Kelly. Like, that's what I hear. It's 37 days till hockey season. That's all I have to tell you, okay? But I was watching Quarterback on Netflix and watched that, and that was kind of filling my time. And I really fell in love with Kirk Cousins, okay? Like, he makes me feel like I have a shot at style, right? Like I feel good about my clothes after watching Kirk Cousins, some of his like press interviews. I mean, the man is he's an incredible legend, right? Like I loved just his character, and I loved his demeanor, and all of a sudden I found like I'm a Vikings fan after the end of this. He plays for the Vikings, right? I had a moment. Yeah, okay. It's the purple team. So, but there was a quote that he said in this show that was fascinating, and I did want to share this with you. He said, I just want to get to a place where every Sunday I feel as comfortable with the plan as I possibly can, so I can just go play and not think. But it takes a lot of work during the week to get there. Interesting, right? So what he's saying is, as I'm laying around in pajamas, eating hurricane snacks, staying up way too late, being critical of what Kirk Cousins is wearing, he's out there saying, I want to be as disciplined as I possibly can be, so that when I step onto the field, I'm not worried about plays and all this. I'm just in the moment. I'm in the zone. I'm connecting with receivers. I'm ready to go. And I think it's so funny how quickly we can step out of discipline. How quickly we can step out of our routine and those things that are healthy habits for us, like going to bed on time for me. That's one of my main disciplines. And this doesn't only happen during storms or storms of life. Discipline happens in any area of our life that we can step away from it. Here's how we define discipline. If you're taking notes, discipline is the art of making consistent, positive choices that steer you towards your goals and dreams. Your discipline that shows up in every aspect of your life, whether that's financial, right? You've got financial goals, and your discipline says, I'm not going to spend my vacation money at Target. I ain't doing it, Joanna Gaines. We're over shiplap, right? Like, this ain't going to happen. Like, I'm going to be disciplined. You might have some emotional goals, right? I'm not going to be triggered by my mother-in-law. I'm going to have self-control over my attitude, right? Or career goals, where you say, I'm gonna exceed this quarter's numbers, and I'm gonna do it because of my discipline, consistent, positive choices that steer me in that direction. Maybe it's your relationships. I'm going to have discipline myself in relationships. I'm going to put myself out there to meet people and to grow some of the relationships that I have already. Somehow, we set goals and dreams. Typically, we do that, almost everybody does that in January. And then around now, we're like, did any of them even remotely happen? We just give up, right? Because somehow we miss out on our goals and dreams, largely because not of lack of direction, but it's because of a lack of discipline, and sometimes even a lack of desire. Because here's what we all know to be true, that discipline without desire is drudgery. If you have a goal in mind, but you have no desire to get to that goal, then you will not ever be disciplined enough to stick with it. Hear me out. In the beginning of the year, you say, oh man, I just want to lose some weight, right? Like, I want to lose some weight, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to eat vegetables, all vegetables. You swear off anything good. And you're like, yeah, I was waiting for you guys. You're a little slow today. Like, let's pick it up, okay? I'm a fast talker. I get it. I'm from up north. But here's the deal. If you're saying, I want to lose weight, and I'm going to do it by eating vegetables, on week 2, you might be happy that you made it that far. Week 3, you're giving up. If you don't have the why, if you haven't determined your why, you will never do it. You got to say, my desire is that I want to be around for my grandkids. My desire is that I want to be able to sleep better. My desire is I want to bring my cholesterol down. My desire is, and because of your desire, you will be disciplined. And that discipline will not appear as drudgery. You'll be like, let's go attack the day. I got this. We need to focus on that. And in this series, Out of Step, I want to give you some of that desire back. I want you to say, okay, I'm going to be a disciplined person, not just for discipline's sake, right? Because, the Bible tells us that there are things that we should be disciplined in, that God has some spiritual habits, some spiritual disciplines for you and for your life. And these things, in order to stay in step with the Holy Spirit's leading, we have to have a desire for that. And so in some of these weeks as we go through, in week 2, we're going to talk about margin. What is God's plan, and how do you discipline yourself to have margin in your life? Margin looks like white space on your calendar. Anybody want some of that? Maybe you're saying, I got no time, but I got a bad attitude too. And we're going to talk about what is God's plan for spiritually, the discipline of gratitude. How do you have gratitude as a person, and particularly as a Christ follower? We're going to get into the idea of what does God say about church? What does he say about church and the discipline of being the church? And then we're going to talk about what does God say about the discipline of stewarding our resources well. But today I want to start with an important topic, a topic that I think matters to all of us more than we ever give it credit for. And the one thing that has the power to destroy aspects of your life or build up your life. And as Americans, I think there are very few things that we approach more casually than this topic right here. And this one word is community. See, community is the thing that we, for too long, can just take for granted. And I want to help you embrace the power of community today. And what does God say about the discipline, because it's a discipline, of being in community? As Americans, we tend to think of ourselves as self-made people, right? You go to school and you study, and you make, your name is on that diploma. You go build a business and you're the founder. You go build your family's wealth and it's you that accomplished that. And we can take all the credit because of our ego, and maybe that's why we don't want to be in community with others. Or maybe we're just kind of annoyed with everybody else. And we see their true colors on Facebook and we're like, forget it. I don't need that. I don't even want to know you, right? Like, we push community away because we're told that you are a self-made man, a self-made woman. So I put this up on the screen here for you. I want you to check out this kind of continuum, if you will, of where you find yourself and how you value community. See, for some of us, we would say that community is really just a luxury. And what I mean by that is that at this end of the spectrum, relationships are seen as non-essential additions to your life. This might be interesting when people are, when you're needing somebody, but otherwise it's just kind of an indulgence or a bonus. Maybe you're more central and you would say that relationships are optional. And the optional nature of these relationships are that, they're valuable for personal growth and enjoyment, but they're not really your central focus. And it's only good when it's convenient. But maybe community is a priority to you. And at this far end of the spectrum, relationships, they take precedence over everything else in your life, and they're considered essential for happiness and for personal growth. But somewhere, you will find yourself on this spectrum. And the question I have for you today is, where are you on that spectrum? And my goal is today, I want to help you move a couple notches further towards priority. Not just because I think community is great, but because I think that this is God's plan for us. And in fact, today I want to help you see that and discover that. In Genesis chapter 2, I want to invite you to open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 2. If you're new to church, this is a great day for you. Just open the Bible, just the front cover, and you're there. You found it, you're with us, and you can feel like an old pro, okay? So Genesis 2, we find the very first book of the Bible. It holds the records of the first human beings and their interactions with their creator, God. And in verse 18, it says, "The Lord God said, 'It's not good for the man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him.'" See, God starts off by looking at all of the things that he created, and he's like, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's not good. That's good, like all the plants and animals, that's good. Stars in the sky, that's good. The moon and the tides, that's good. Adam being alone, not good. God saw what he created and said, there needs to be others. I'm pretty convinced this is why we love shows about isolation. If you look at what kind of popular shows are on Discovery Channel and stuff like that, it centers around isolation, people being forced into isolation, like the show Survivor or the show Alone. I'm a huge fan of the show Alone, or Man vs. Wild or Life Below Zero. We watch these shows because we're fascinated by people that are willing to subject themselves to isolation. And then we wonder how do you do that? And then some of them, if you're like me, you just can't wait for them to crack. I love the show Alone. I would say 60 to 75% of the people that tap out of the show Alone, it's not because they're hungry. It's not because they're uncomfortable. It's because they can't deal with being by themselves. They're like, this is not worth it. $500,000 for me to not be around my family? No, I'm out. Get that helicopter over here right now and bring me home. See, Genesis 2 reveals to us that it's not good for you to be alone. In fact, you are designed for community. God built that into your DNA. This is a part of you. God designed us to be in relationships. He put us in communities, and those communities are designed to meet the needs that God put inside of us. Every single one of you has a longing for belonging. Some of you need to belong to a big crowd of people. Others of you are okay with a smaller crowd of people. But you all have the desire to belong somewhere. This is a part of who you are. And our culture has tried to extract us from community, but God has called us to community, specifically to biblical community. Here's how Pastor Tim Keller defines biblical community. You can read this with me on the screens. It says, biblical community is built on grace and gospel-centered living. It's a place where people can be transparent about their struggles, find acceptance, and experience God's transforming love. Do not miss the components that Keller talks about as biblical community. It's grace-based, gospel-centered. You can be transparent about who you really are, about your struggles, about your hardships. And it's where you're going to find acceptance, people that love you. It's where you're going to experience God's transformational love in your life. And biblical community is radical. It changes you. See, I've been welcomed into a bunch of communities in my life. Tiffany and I have moved a few times. We've come to new towns, new neighborhoods, and we've been welcomed to those communities. When I first became a dad, I was welcomed to the community of fatherhood by some other men. When I lost my dad, when he passed away, I'll never forget walking into church like 2 Sundays later, and I was cornered by a guy by the name of Tom, and then also a guy by the name of Rick. And they both cornered me, and they said, we want to take you out to breakfast this next week. I said, okay. And they sat me down at Perkins, and they said, hey, Peter, we want to welcome you to the club. I was like, what club? They said, you're now a member of a club that nobody ever wants to be a part of, but we want to welcome you to it, and we want you to know that we too have experienced what you've experienced. We lost our dad at a young age, and if you need anything, we're in this together. And that has stayed with me since that moment. See, you were designed for community. You were designed for one another, and we need one another. This is one of the reasons why we host Next Steps. Like, our Next Steps class is an opportunity for you not just to get connected to Hope City and learn more about the church. That actually is like a byproduct. What we're trying to do is we want you to experience what biblical community is, what it can be, and to discover your purpose, how God created you, and how to live on purpose. And see, I'd love for you to be at that next one. It's in a couple weeks, and don't miss out on that opportunity to find your place and your purpose. But I don't want you to take my word for it that community is important and community is critical. I want you to listen to what one of the wisest men on planet Earth has said. This is King Solomon writing in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. He says, I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. This is the case of a man who's all alone, without a child or a brother, and yet he works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. Sound like anybody you know, right? But then he asks himself, who am I working for? And why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It's all so meaningless and depressing. Solomon, the author of Ecclesiastes, has seen some stuff. He's lived his life. Like, he is writing about an experience of chasing after certain things. He's chasing after experiences that he's found to be utterly useless. And he's writing this down so that you and I can avoid chasing after these useless things. And he says that loneliness is right there at the top of some of the most meaningless things in life. Introverts, I want you to listen to me, okay? Loneliness is not being introverted. You need people too as introverts. Just because you draw energy from silence and solitude and reading a book in a corner and kind of shutting out the world around you, once you're energized, we need you to come back to the party. Like, we need your voice. We need you in our community. And because Solomon writes this, he writes this next. He says, 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. He says, you're in trouble if you fall by yourself. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer, and 3 are even better. For a triple braided cord is not easily broken. Solomon's seen some stuff. He knows that some things can happen when you're by yourself. There was an industry built around this. Anybody remember the Life Alert commercials from when you were a kid? Help, I've fallen and I can't get up, right? Like, this is straight out of Scripture. They're saying, I'm telling you that, what's your business plan? Ecclesiastes, right? You pitch it on Shark Tank, and they're like, done, I guess. I found it in Scripture. You cannot, when you fall by yourself, it's a problem. You need to click that little button on your necklace, and somebody comes and saves you. Or if you're in community, you got people around you. And this is like Bear Grylls right here. He's out in the wilderness, and what does he say? I've watched enough Bear Grylls. If you are experiencing hypothermia, what's the first thing he says? I know this is going to get weird. Getting that sleeping bag together, body heat together, right? You're going to, the 2 people together, body heat is going to save that person's life. Solomon knew that years before Bear Grylls ever found it. Because community, it makes you stronger. He's saying get back to back, and you'll protect yourself in community. it's so much easier and safer to go through life when you know that there's a community that has your back and that's going to make you stronger. Going through life alone, it's not only arrogant, it's foolish. Because you need people in your community to help you in your corner. I'm the guy, I'll tell you, life is challenging. Life is hard. It's not easy. And every single person at some point in time in your life is going to experience heartache, trouble, pain, and you need people. Pain is hard enough to walk through. It's unbearable to walk through it by yourself. And it's unnecessary to do. There is a community of people gathered to help you, to walk with you. See, there's nothing better than a community that you can bear your problems, bear your soul to, bear your fears, bear your anxiety. Just talk about these things, right? And they come around you with an encouraging word, or they pray for you on the spot, or they bring you a meal. Remember when you used to bring like a casserole to somebody's house? Like you'd find out that somebody was, they had a bad week, and maybe you heard it through the prayer chain, and then the prayer chain, alerted somebody, and then it created this like casserole chain, and you'd bring like a single dish that you may or may not ever get back, and you didn't really know what was in it in the first place, but it didn't matter what was in it. What mattered was that somebody showed up at your doorstep and cared for you. We could do really well to bring back some casseroles into Christianity, to just show up at people's homes. Don't screen them on your Ring camera. Just go answer the door. I'm serious, be in community with people. I'm the first to tell you, like, when the UPS guy shows up and rings the camera, I'm like, I don't need to go out there and say hi to him. I can go get it by myself later. But I probably need to go say hi to Steve. And I just need to say, hey, man, thanks so much. Appreciate all you do. Because guess what? This week, Steve dropped off 9 tables for Hope City's building, infinite amount of boxes of chairs. And he's like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, oh, we're building a church over on Bee Ridge and McIntosh, and thank you so much for dropping all this off. Like, we unloaded his whole truck into my garage. It was crazy. And here's the deal. It's like we need to be in community. We need to talk with one another. Because in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, it says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Paul uses this word, carry, and it's more than just like, oh, like let me hold on to it, kind of rock, like the way you would rock a baby. He says, like, get your shoulder up underneath of it. Like when you're moving and you're carrying something that's really heavy, and you got some people, maybe 4 people on a corner, and you go, oh, don't forget, lift with your legs, not your back, and you kind of get your shoulder up under, and you can hold it up together. That's the concept of carrying each other's burdens. It's getting your shoulder underneath of somebody else's burden. If you've ever seen somebody carried off the field, they have nothing to do with it. They're completely relying on the people around them to help them get off the field. Unless you're Patrick Mahomes, and then you just whine about it the whole way off the field. But, shot across the bow. See, community strengthens you. But your friends, they can't change the outcome of your situation, but they can change your outlook on that situation. And that, to me, is worth everything. Proverbs 27:17 would back me up. It says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. You need people to make you better, to make you stronger. You need people in your community, because Christian community is not only meant for fun and comfort, that might be a byproduct of it. In fact, some of my best friends and funniest moments have been here in community. But biblical community is meant to shape your soul. It's meant to bring you hope during your struggles. Because community, it does exactly that. It shapes your life. It strengthens you through, corporate worship. When we gather together on a Sunday morning and worship God, the Lord reminds us together that our worlds are a whole lot smaller and God is far more important than whatever we've got going on in our heads that day. We're strengthened by taking communion together. And remembering Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, it should lead us as a community to be focused on the redemption found in Christ. Biblical teaching grows a community together around biblical values and God's plan for that specific community. Gathering together, both at church, in connect groups, in people's homes, to share times and meals together, strengthens relationships in community. And lastly, biblical community is one that forgives one another's offenses. And that strengthens the community and changes you. And without your community, these things are challenged. I grew up as a church kid, and not only just a church kid, I was a pastor's kid, so that meant that, I really was at church. But I'm grateful that I was, to be honest with you, because my church community shaped me, shaped my view on life, and it made me stronger. I can tell you that I would not be here today if it were not for my community. I think about men and women that poured into me, that shaped me and helped me and loved me along the way. People like Jim and Nancy McGuire. They were my 6th grade Sunday school teachers that put up with my shenanigans, they just loved me for who I was in the fullness of my 6th grade self. So I watch Ty and Sarah McDuffie walking out with our middle school students to our middle school class back there, and I think about Jim and Nancy and the impact that they had on my life. And what a difference. They don't even know the impact that they're making right now. Right? I think about Dave Huff. He was one of my youth leaders who was one of the first people to ask me the question, hey, Peter, what do you think God's doing in your life and through your life? It was a conversation with Dave after youth group one night that I was pretty certain that God was calling me to ministry. And I'm grateful for him. James Pendleton, he saw pastoral potential in me. He hired me as a junior high youth pastor at 18. I think about Bob and Alice Miller, who loved me and my family and stepped in during some of the hardest moments of Tiffany and I's young parenting journey. And these are just a few names that both shaped and strengthened me. What names are in your community? Like, who are the people that you're thinking of right now? When I talk about Jim and Nancy, your mind goes to that person's name. Thank God for those names right now. Like, write them down and say, God, I'm so grateful for the people that you're thinking of. They're a gift to you. Maybe it's your connect group leader. Maybe it's the women in your connect group, or the men in your connect group, or the women on your serving team, or other dream team members. Maybe it's staff members like Kelsey and Megan or Ryan. Maybe it's Scott. And maybe it's Chuck. Maybe it's your neighbor. Who are the people that you're grateful for? Because your stories will be impacted by those voices. Your experiences will be shaped by them. And as a reminder, we're striving to create biblical community, one that's built on grace and gospel-centered living, a place where you can be transparent about your struggles and fully accepted. Hebrews 10:24 says this, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. See, the goal isn't to point out people's faults. The goal is to help experience the radical redemption of God's love, to see people set free in Jesus by the power of his grace and truth. It's one of the reasons I love Hope City's missions trip that's coming up in January. In fact, we know that when you go in that small team of 10 to 15 people, that you will be shaping one another as you spend time in the Dominican Republic. But not only will you be shaping one another, you will be shaping people around you. And in that little community, you're going to grow together, just in the same way that the trip that we took, we grew together as a team, and we helped shape and mold one another. I want to invite you to be a part of that, to sign up for the January missions trip and see how community is formed in that space. But community is critical for you and I because community keeps you accountable to growth. It actually pushes you to continue to grow. See, when you got a group of people around you that know you and love you, there's no stopping the type of growth that you can have. Holding people accountable is not running around and telling them, oh, you need to stop smoking. You need to stop doing this. No. Oftentimes that's just judgment. And judgment is where, Hypocrisy is born, saying one thing and then you doing another thing. Biblical accountability is giving an account according to the clear standard of God's word in the context of personal relationship. Don't forget the personal relationship. It's not only helpful, this is necessary. If we're going to grow together, we will grow infinitely times faster and further when we're in community than when we're isolated and alone. Accountability helps you overcome pestering sins, both big and small. Accountability helps you overcome anxiety and fear. Accountability helps you strengthen your mind and your body, because community keeps you accountable to growth. There have been times when I've been so tempted not to tell you like some decisions that I've made in my own life. Like when I decided to do Whole30, which I'm not doing it. So when I decided to do Whole30, I talked about it. And then, of course, after I told you I was doing Whole30, then you got people running around that was like, Pastor, I thought that you weren't allowed to have that. I'm like, how about you just take 30 minutes time out and mind your own business, right? Like, that there's this sense of when I shared something with you, I became accountable to you. And it's hard, but at the same time, it's good and it causes growth. You can't be accountable to everybody, but you need to be accountable to somebody. There's a few people that I've invited to ask the hardest questions of my life. Just ask me anything. Ask me about my marriage. Ask me how am I doing serving my wife. I've given them permission to ask these questions about how am I doing with my kids. Questions about how am I taking care of myself. It's not easy, but it's worth it because we need one another. I get it that discipline without desire is drudgery, but discipline can change your life. And God designed you to experience it. See, the community that you develop today, the community of people, it determines the stories that you talk about tomorrow. It determines the tales that you tell your grandkids because of the community that's around you. And this morning, I want to give you some space for real, tangible steps towards community. There's a couple things that you can do. First off, I want to invite you to consider joining a Connect group. There's cards on your chair. If there's not, there's one in front of you. This QR code right here, scan this, and there's opportunities for you to get connected in a Connect group. These are micro communities of 6 to 10 people that you gather with, and you just share life with them. You get to experience life together, and you get to find and build relationships that we need. And I want to encourage you with everything I have to make that a priority this fall. But there's other things too. I'm inviting you to strengthen the friendships that you already have around you. Right now I want to give you a moment to ask the Lord, in just this space right here, God, how can I take a step towards community? God, I got the desire. Would you meet me in the discipline?